Good afternoon, everyone. David DuByne here from the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast and Adapt2030.tv on Roku. Massive inflation going to hit. Global central banks are going to print $571 billion per month. And when it collides with the realization you cannot print food, Uruguay mega drought, Paraguay mega drought, Argentina mega drought. What do you think's happening in Brazil? Slamming record cold coming to the United States Southeast, followed by record slamming heat in Canada. Jet streams broken, economy broken, the grand solar minimum can no longer be hidden. And this might help explain why we're being forced to stand out in line outside of supermarkets waiting to get in. Limited capacity in the supermarkets, and once you're inside, you're limited on the amount that you can purchase at any one time. Pre-training. And reading through the financial news, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup all now say this is the time to buy gold. And now that the election's over, we have clear signs from analysts that gold and silver is preparing to soar to new highs. A gold IRA uses the value of precious metals to keep you out of trouble. The team at Noble Gold knows how to do this, and they've done it for thousands of other people before you. Don't let a sudden stock market, banking crisis, or currency reset wipe out your finances. Grab the phone and give Noble Gold a call now. 877-646-5347, and you'll also find the link in the description box below the video. And a quick weather warning for everybody traveling back that's going to be on the roads or through airports after Thanksgiving in through next week, approximately on the 30th. Going to be some unusual snowfalls in the southeast U.S. all the way down into Georgia. And at the same time, massive cold front going to swing through all the way down to Cuba. Look at the island nation down there, about 20 degrees Celsius below normal temperatures. They're looking for all-time record cold records to be smashed. This is not wintertime yet. As such, these types of temperatures are not expected until February in places like Cuba. So it's a couple of months ahead in the extreme cold. And off the GFS model, you can see through the record cold from Texas all the way through Tennessee, Georgia, down into Florida. And what's most interesting about this pocket of record-breaking cold that snapped off from an Arctic low and is drifting by itself, the cold is literally off the charts, at least for this GFS model. These are in degrees Celsius. So compared to Fahrenheit, degrees Celsius are much cooler. But at the same time, the inversion just days after is that bright white spot of heat in Canada, signaling a massive break in the jet streams yet again. This polar vortices and equatorial vortex is going to be seen through the winter. Anomalous cold events in the southern hemisphere, anomalous warm and cold events in the northern hemisphere. It's really starting to match up now with this grand solar minimum intensification. And many people watching this channel, and those of you studying the effects of the sun on our crop yields, have known that there is a little bit of shell game happening at the moment. I think 2021 is the year that it can no longer be hidden, because looking at the amount of money printing forecast here by all central banks across the globe, we're going to break it down into G10 and then all nations. So far, the commitment of just the G10 central banks is going to be $304 billion per month in quantitative easing, and then they're also going to add to the balance sheets, and they're going to take assets. And it'll be that continuous bicycle chain of print, buy, print, buy, print, buy. Now, where is all this money going to go to, you might ask? Stock market and probably cryptocurrency. So you would look for all-time record highs in the stock market. I would be not even surprised if the Dow Jones went to 40,000 with all this extra money printing in, which is a complete disconnect with what's happening on Main Street when all these other small mom-and-pop businesses are going to be closed due to more official quote-unquote lockdowns. So how did these numbers come to be? What we're really looking at there is the 0.66 of global GDP. They might as well added another 6 on there in the news article here. But if we look at total global GDP at 86.6 trillion, and then you take 0.66% of that per month, you come up with the totals. Now, a number is one thing, but then if you can break it down into the aggregate here, so wherever you are across the planet, The higher the bar is, the more inflation you're going to have. The higher the bar is, the more bailouts to private companies there will be from the government. The higher the bar is, the more these central banks are going to buy private assets and put them on their balance sheets. And this is a look at the percentage of the annual GDP that's going to be set. So we're looking at what the European Central Bank at ECB at 0.9, let's just round it off, 1%. So if you know then what the entire GDP of the European Union is, then just take 1% of that, and that's what they're going to print every month for excess liquidity to push it in the market to keep it from collapsing. On this chart here off Morgan Stanley and Bloomberg, this is just strictly G10, how much they intend for a monthly injection of quantitative easing, as if we haven't seen that enough right now. And what's the U.S. debt going up to? $30 trillion as we speak. Well, continue to add this into the totals through the year, and you can see how many more trillion that we will add as Americans onto. Now, do you think our fiat currency is going to continue to hold value? Because when I see massive jumps like this, and you know this little curtailing here is going to be the flat point before it goes vertical again, what do you think is going to hold value during this time? And why has there been so much injection into cryptocurrency markets over the last, say, week into the bull run 2.0? And why are banks now asking for more down payment if you're going to buy a home? There's just a lot of little red flags out there that are showing something's not exactly as it looks on paper, because we've been told so many times central banks cannot print food. And case in point, it's really starting to show now different countries are having difficulty producing the amount of food that they did prior. China's its own case. Worst floods in 400 years in the central area, crop growing. Worst floods in 200 years, southern areas, and the northern areas in Heirloom, etc. on the North Korean border were smashed by several typhoons this year. Chinese production, its own separate universe of demand over there, but then when we look around the planet, we don't see that many mega crop yields coming in that are going to add to these totals to bring us into anywhere remotely close to what we produced last year. So looking at Kazakhstan, I like how they worded this here. They said the wheat exports are ahead of. Okay, that's fine. You're already selling something that you have. But then they talk about the improved crop conditions still in a drought phase there. So they don't give you the actual forecast for what they might think of production this year. But the EU comes clean and says soft wheat exports down 22% because of reduced production. A little bit different than the way Kazakhstan worded it, and you can see clearly what I mean there. Over to Russia, focusing in on the planted area, but then in the next paragraph, agriculture consultancy in Russia saying, whoa, wait a second, soils are still in bad shape, massive drought happening there as well. And then if we jump over to South America, the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange reporting production down 11%, dryness and frost damage. And I thought, well, Argentina's a massive producer over there. Wanted to do a little more research on Argentina and then quickly found lack of rains in Uruguay slammed their plans for expansion of 10% in soybeans, reducing the planted area by 1 million hectares. Now remember, a hectare is 2.4 acres. So imagine that massive expansion. I'm wondering where the land's coming from to do such an expansion of 2.5 million acres in Uruguay. Obviously, they're going to switch crops from corn or something else in the acreage and just go straight soybean. And they're pretty good about reporting what's happening down there. The crop reaching 2 million metric tons, well behind the estimate of 3 million. That's a 33% miss. That's a huge miss. If you're off by 2 or 3 or 5%, okay, that's borderline losing your job if you're off by that much. But being off by 33%, that's huge. And again, what was it cited? Drought. So let's take a look at Uruguay here in the planting areas. You can see they border on Brazil. To the west, we see Argentina. Massive drought in Uruguay, massive drought in Argentina. What do you think's happening in Brazil that's not being reported on right now? And I thought, okay, what else is happening? And searching through the same Uruguay news feeds here, Paraguay. Corn exports decline 43% as their rivers hit 50-year lows in water depth. Yeah, I don't think you're going to be doing much barge traffic down this waterway here. And if this is on the border with Brazil, take a look at the Paraguay soybean production areas. Darkest green is the heaviest production. So then the question needs to be asked, what's going on in Brazil? If every single periphery country is going into a drought and having substantial reduced crop production, how's that going to affect all of South America? Because Brazil's not going to be unaffected by this. And why is it not being widely reported in the news when we're looking at higher soybean prices? If Brazil's excess capacity is suddenly cut, well, we're going to look at a massive, massive spike. Although the Chinese might stop buying U.S. soy because of the crush margins, the amount that they can buy it in the U.S. versus what they can actually crush that oil out for and then resell it in China, that reduction is shrinking and shrinking where it's almost not profitable anymore. But to get it versus not having it is where we're going to be moving to here in 2021. And I truly believe 2021 is going to be summed up with the Cree Indian proverb. Only when the last tree has died and the last river has been poisoned, the last fish caught, will we realize we cannot eat money. The central banks are going to continue to print. Global crop production is going to continue to decline. Massive food inflation, rationing, reductions. And you'll understand why. You've been standing in line for how many months? Pre-trained for rationing. Trained already that you can only buy one or two of something. Perfect timing for the shift of a society overlaid in parallel with the grand solar minimum intensification. Maybe the world will make a little more sense now. It's all about control and access to food for 8 billion people when there'll only be enough for 7.5 billion people. So how prepared are you for these types of emergencies and food supplies for you and your families? 2-week or 4-week emergency food supply, as well as water filtration, Mylar packs if you want to pack it yourself for storable foods that you can keep in your home. You can head over to My Patriot Supply. The link's in the description box below. I'm wondering how people are going to react when they find out the truth. See you next video.